Hey guys, tonight we're traveling somewhere so cold that your spit freezes before it hits the ground. Seriously, locals in Oymyakon, Yakutia actually test the temperature this way. If your saliva crackles in mid-air, it's around minus 40 degrees Celsius. If it makes a sharp snapping sound, congratulations, you're experiencing minus 50 degrees Celsius or colder. And if you're foolish enough to try this at minus 60 degrees Celsius, well, you'll hear nothing because the moisture freezes instantly into tiny ice crystals that tinkle like broken glass on the permafrost beneath your feet. You're standing in Oymyakon, Russia, a place that holds the dubious honor of being the coldest permanently inhabited settlement on Earth. The official record? A bone-shattering minus 67.7 degrees Celsius minus 89.9 degrees Fahrenheit recorded in 1933, though locals will tell you, usually while chain-smoking cigarettes that somehow still burn in sub-zero air, that they've seen the thermometer drop even lower. Some elders swear they've witnessed minus 71 degrees Celsius, temperatures so extreme that the alcohol thermometers cracked because even the mercury ones had long since frozen solid. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Are you in sunny California at noon? Melbourne in the early morning? Drop your location in the comments. It helps me picture all of you scattered across the globe, hopefully somewhere warmer than where we're about to spend the night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The name Oymyakon comes from the Yakut word Kiam, meaning unfrozen patch of water, a reference to a nearby thermal spring where reindeer herders would once water their animals. The irony isn't lost on anyone. You're in a place named after liquid water, yet you haven't seen actual flowing water in months. Everything is ice. The ground beneath you is permafrost extending down 1,500 meters, nearly a mile of frozen earth that hasn't thawed since the Pleistocene epoch. You're essentially standing on an ice cube the size of a small country, and on top of this ice cube, about 500 hardy souls have decided to call this place home. You've just arrived, though arrived is perhaps too simple a word for the ordeal you've endured. The nearest city, Yakutsk, is roughly 920 kilometers away, a 2-day drive on the Road of Bones, so named because it was built by Gulag prisoners in the 1930s, many of whom died during construction and were supposedly buried beneath the road itself. Historians still argue whether bodies were actually entombed in the roadbed or simply buried nearby, but either way, you've been driving over a monument to human suffering in conditions that make suffering feel inevitable. Your vehicle, a UAZ 452, affectionately called a loaf because it looks like a bread van, has been running continuously for the past 3 days. The engine hasn't been turned off once. You stopped for fuel, for food, for sleep at a roadside station where you dozed in the heated cabin while the engine idled, burning precious diesel, because restarting a cold engine in these temperatures is somewhere between extremely difficult and functionally impossible. The locals heat their engine blocks with blowtorches. You've seen it with your own eyes. A farmer casually applying open flame to his truck's undercarriage as if he's just warming up leftovers. Now you're here, stepping out of the relative warmth of your 30 degrees Celsius cabin into air so cold it feels like you've walked into a wall. The first breath sears your nostrils. The moisture inside your nose freezes instantly, and you feel the tiny hairs become crisp, almost crunchy. Your second breath is more cautious, drawn through the scarf you've quickly wrapped around your face. The locals taught you this: never breathe deeply through your mouth or nose. Let the fabric pre-warm the air, or you'll risk frost damage to your lungs. Your eyelashes are already accumulating frost. You blink and they stick together slightly. Another blink, and they're fully crusted with ice. You reach up with a gloved hand. 3 layers. A thin liner, a thick wool middle, and an outer shell of wind-resistant material, and gently break the ice away. You'll repeat this action approximately every 45 seconds for as long as you remain outside. The village stretches before you, a collection of small wooden houses, each one trailing a continuous plume of smoke from its chimney. The smoke rises straight up in the still air. When it's this cold, wind is rare because the air is too dense to move easily. The smoke columns look like white pillars supporting the pale gray sky. It's 2 in the afternoon, but the sun, such as it is in January, hangs low on the horizon, providing light but virtually no warmth. In another hour, it will set, and you'll have roughly 19 hours of darkness ahead of you. Your host, Mikhail, greets you at the door of what will be your home for the next several weeks. He's 63, born and raised here, and has never lived anywhere warmer. You picked a good day, he says in Russian, which your translator app renders into English through your phone. A phone you're keeping inside your innermost jacket pocket because you learned the hard way that phone batteries die within minutes in this cold. Only minus 52 degrees Celsius today. Almost comfortable. He's not joking. To people who have lived here their entire lives, anything warmer than minus 45 degrees Celsius is genuinely pleasant. They'll go outside without hats. You've seen photographs of children playing in t-shirts at minus 30 degrees Celsius. The human body's capacity for adaptation is extraordinary, though you're not sure you'll be here long enough to undergo that transformation. You're still at the stage where minus 52 degrees Celsius feels like your face is being sandblasted with frozen razors. Inside, Mikhail's home is surprisingly warm, around 25 degrees Celsius, which feels tropical after the exterior. The heat comes from a wood-burning stove that occupies a central position in the main room, an iron beast that consumes logs at an alarming rate. Mikhail feeds it throughout the day and night. The wood pile outside is the size of a small house. We burn about 12 cubic meters per winter, he explains. Sometimes 15 if it's especially cold. You do the math in your head. Winter here lasts from October to April, 7 months. 15 cubic meters is roughly 530 cubic feet of wood. That's approximately 6 full cords. You think about your friend back home who complains about buying 2 cords for his fireplace that he uses occasionally on weekend evenings. Mikhail burns 3 times that much just to survive, to keep his pipes from bursting, to maintain a bubble of livable atmosphere inside wooden walls that are themselves covered in a thin layer of interior frost in the corners where the heat doesn't quite reach. Come, I'll show you where you'll sleep, Mikhail says, leading you down a short hallway. The temperature drops noticeably as you move away from the stove. Your bedroom is at the far end of the house, the coldest spot, naturally. There's a small electric heater plugged into the wall, glowing orange, doing its best. The room hovers around 15 degrees Celsius, which Mikhail assures you is perfectly adequate. You'll want blankets, he adds, gesturing to a pile that looks sufficient for a small family. 3 or 4 should do it. And here, he picks up your pillow. You'll want to scrape this before you sleep. You look at the pillow. It appears normal at first glance, covered in a faded floral pillowcase. Then Mikhail angles it toward the light, and you see what he means. The surface is covered in a thin crust of ice crystals, delicate feathers of frost that have accumulated from previous sleepers' breath. The moisture from breathing, he explains. It freezes on the pillow. Everyone's pillow here is like this. You scrape it with your hand, or use a knife if it's thick. Otherwise, you'll be sleeping on ice, and believe me, that's not comfortable. You take the pillow from him, feeling its stiff, cold weight. This is your introduction to a fundamental truth of life in Oymyakon. Everything is a negotiation with ice. The ice wants to be everywhere, on your pillow, in your lungs, coating the interior walls, filling your water pipes, crystallizing in your hair. Your entire existence here will be a constant, exhausting effort to maintain small pockets of warmth and dryness in an environment that is fundamentally hostile to both. That night, you lie in bed under 4 heavy blankets, wearing thermal underwear, wool socks, and a knit cap. Your breath rises in visible clouds even inside the house. You watch it drift upward, illuminated by the pale moonlight coming through the window. A window that is completely opaque with frost on both sides, transforming it into a translucent panel of white. Outside, the temperature has dropped to minus 58 degrees Celsius. Inside your room, it's now about 12 degrees Celsius. You can feel the cold pressing against your cocoon of blankets, probing for weaknesses. Your face is the only exposed part of your body, and it's cold. Your nose is cold. Your cheeks are cold. You pull the blanket higher, leaving just enough gap to breathe, and feel the warm, moist air from your breath immediately begin to condense and freeze on the fabric near your mouth. By morning, this section of blanket will be stiff with ice. You think about Mikhail sleeping down the hall. You think about the other 499 people in this village, all of them breathing frost onto their pillows, all of them wrapped in layers, all of them living in this impossible place where winter is not a season but a state of existence. You think about the children you saw earlier, walking home from school in darkness, their flashlights bobbing like fireflies, seemingly unbothered by conditions that would kill an unprepared person in under an hour. And you realize, as sleep begins to pull you under, that you're experiencing something most humans will never know. What it truly means to live at the edge of survivability, where every day is a small victory against an environment that, by all reasonable measures, should be uninhabitable. You're in Oymyakon, the coldest inhabited place on Earth, and tomorrow morning, before anything else, you'll need to scrape the ice off your pillow. The first thing you hear is the sound of ice cracking, not the ice outside. There's no wind, no movement, nothing but the profound silence that only exists when the air itself is too cold to carry sound properly. No, the cracking you hear is coming from your own pillow, right next to your ear. You've shifted in your sleep, and the accumulated frost has formed a brittle shell that fractures with each small movement of your head. You don't want to open your eyes. You're aware, even in your half-conscious state, that opening your eyes means acknowledging the cold. Right now, under your fortress of blankets, you've created a microclimate not warm exactly but tolerable. Your body heat has spent the last 6 hours working to establish this fragile equilibrium. The moment you emerge, you'll surrender all that effort to the void. But you need to pee. Of course you do. You tried to avoid drinking water before bed, but Mikhail insisted. Dehydration is dangerous here, he'd said, because you don't realize how much moisture you're losing with every breath in this desiccated air. So you drank, and now your bladder is making demands that cannot be negotiated away with mere willpower. You open your eyes. The room is dark but not completely black. There's a faint blue quality to the darkness. The kind of light that suggests dawn is still hours away but isn't entirely absent either. Your phone, which you've kept under your pillow for warmth, tells you it's 6:47 a.m. In December and January here, sunrise doesn't happen until nearly 10 a.m., and even then, sunrise is a generous term for the pale disk that barely clears the horizon before beginning its descent again around 2 p.m. You sit up, and the cold hits you like a physical force. The air in your room is sharp, almost spiky against your skin. Your breath comes out in thick clouds that immediately begin to drift downward. Cold air is heavy air. You fumble for the small flashlight on your bedside table, and its beam reveals a landscape of frost. The window is completely opaque, covered in elaborate fern-like patterns of ice crystals. The walls, particularly in the corners, sport thin crusts of white. And your pillow, when you angle the light toward it, looks like someone has sprinkled it with powdered sugar, except the sugar is frozen condensation from your own breath. You reach out with one hand and scrape it across the pillowcase. The ice comes away in flakes and small chunks, surprisingly thick, nearly 2 millimeters in some spots. You've been sleeping with your face close to this ice formation, separated only by the thin fabric of the pillowcase. Your face, you realize, is probably the warmest thing in the room right now aside from the small electric heater still glowing in the corner, and heat plus moisture equals frost. Every night, everyone in Oymyakon performs this same ritual. Scrape your pillow before sleep, scrape it again in the morning, and on particularly cold nights, scrape it in the middle of the night if the buildup becomes uncomfortable. But the pillow can wait. Right now, you need to address the more pressing issue. You steel yourself, throw off the blankets, and stand up. The cold rushes in to fill the warm cavity you've left behind. You're wearing thermal underwear, 2 pairs of socks, and a wool hat, but it's not enough. It's never enough. You grab your pants from the chair where you left them. They're stiff and cold, almost rigid, and pull them on. Your jacket, your boots, which thankfully you left in your room because boots left in the unheated mudroom would be frozen solid by now. The hallway is slightly warmer, maybe 16 degrees Celsius, because it's closer to the main room where the wood stove has been burning all night. Mikhail is already up. You can hear him moving around, feeding logs into the stove. The wood makes a satisfying crackling sound, and you can smell the smoke, a comforting scent that means warmth and survival. But you're not going to the main room. You're heading to the outhouse. In Oymyakon, indoor plumbing is a luxury that exists for only some residents. And even then, it's complicated. Water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, obviously, but getting water to remain liquid when the ambient temperature is minus 50 degrees Celsius or colder requires either constant heating or constant movement. Some homes have managed to install plumbing by running pipes deep underground where the permafrost is actually warmer than the surface air. A bizarre inversion where frozen ground is the heat source. Others use electric heating cables wrapped around pipes. But most residents, including Mikhail, have accepted that indoor toilets are simply not worth the trouble. You step into the mudroom and begin layering. First, another jacket heavier than the one you're already wearing. Then a face mask, a scarf, a hat with ear flaps, and finally your outer gloves. You look like you're preparing for a spacewalk, which isn't far from the truth. The environment outside is, in its own way, as hostile as the vacuum of space. You won't die instantly, but you will die, and probably within a few hours if you're not properly protected. Mikhail emerges from the main room. "Ah, the morning pilgrimage," he says with a slight smile. "Remember, don't sit for too long. The cold will come through the wood faster than you think." You nod, though the thought of the outhouse seat, just bare wood exposed to minus 55 degrees Celsius air, is already making you wince. Some families keep foam seat covers, or they bring a cushion back and forth, but even those are cold. There's no getting around it. When you need to use the toilet in Oymyakon, you accept that you're going to expose one of your most sensitive regions to temperatures that would cause frostbite to unprotected skin in under 5 minutes. You open the door, and the cold doesn't just enter. It invades, pours into the mudroom like water, like something with substance and weight. The moisture from your breath instantly crystallizes in the air, creating a small personal fog bank around your face. You step outside and pull the door shut quickly behind you to preserve the home's precious heat. The outhouse is 20 meters away, which Mikhail has explained is the standard distance. Close enough to be convenient, far enough that smells don't reach the house in summer. Summer. You try to imagine this place in summer, when temperatures might climb all the way to 20 degrees Celsius or even 25 degrees Celsius, when the permafrost surface layer melts into a boggy mess and mosquitoes emerge in biblical swarms. The locals say summer is worse in its own way. At least winter kills the bugs. Your path to the outhouse has been walked so many times that it's worn into a slight depression, and someone, probably Mikhail, has marked it with stakes every few meters. In a blizzard, these stakes are literal lifelines. People have died meters from their own homes, disoriented by blowing snow, unable to find their way back. There's no blizzard this morning, just the silent, crushing cold and darkness. Each breath through your face mask is a small battle. The fabric helps warm the air, but it also traps moisture, and that moisture is freezing into the fabric. Within 30 seconds of walking, your scarf and mask are stiffening with ice. You can feel it forming around your mouth and nose, creating a hard, uncomfortable shell. You'll need to thaw it when you get back inside, or replace it with a dry one. The outhouse looms ahead, a small wooden structure barely larger than a phone booth. There's no light inside. Electricity for an outhouse is considered wasteful when a flashlight works just fine. You pull open the door, which resists slightly because the moisture from previous users has frozen in the hinges, and step inside. You close the door behind you, which provides no warmth but at least blocks the sight of the hostile world outside. The flashlight beam reveals the interior, a simple wooden box with a hole in the top, beneath which is a pit dug deep into the permafrost. In summer, the pit would need to be managed, emptied, dealt with. But in winter, everything freezes immediately. This is, you suppose, one of the few advantages of extreme cold. Sanitation becomes simpler when bacteria can't survive and everything turns to ice. You position yourself, and the cold from the wooden seat hits you even through your layers of pants. Mikhail wasn't exaggerating. The cold comes through wood like wood isn't even there. You do what you need to do as quickly as possible, which is very quickly indeed, because dawdling means frostbite in places you really don't want frostbite. Finished, you exit and make your way back to the house, moving faster now. The cold has penetrated your layers. Your fingers are getting numb even inside the gloves. Your face hurts. The exposed skin around your eyes, you can't cover your eyes, you need to see, is burning with cold. 20 meters feels like 20 kilometers. You reach the door, fumble with the handle with clumsy gloved hands, and practically fall inside. The mudroom feels warm by comparison, though it's probably only 5 degrees Celsius or so. You close the door and stand there for a moment, breathing hard, watching the ice crystals that have formed on your scarf begin to slowly melt in the relatively warmer air. Mikhail appears with a cup of tea, black tea, scalding hot, unsweetened. Good? He asks, which is a question that means both, did you survive? And, did you remember not to touch any metal surfaces with bare skin? Good. You confirm, accepting the tea. Your hands are shaking slightly, though whether from cold or adrenaline, you're not sure. You take a sip, and the heat spreads through your chest, a small sun igniting in your core. The car, Mikhail says. We should check the car. You'd almost forgotten. Your UAZ is parked outside, engine running, as it has been running since you arrived. You left it running yesterday, and it's been running all night, burning diesel at idle just to keep the engine block from freezing into a useless hunk of metal. This is standard practice here. During the deepest winter, from December to February, most vehicles in Oymyakon simply don't turn off. The few that do turn off are parked in heated garages, another luxury most can't afford. You follow Mikhail back outside, this time walking around the side of the house to where your vehicle sits. Even from a distance, you can see the exhaust cloud, a massive plume of white vapor rising from the tailpipe. The car is surrounded by its own microclimate of warmed air and exhaust, and when you get close, you can actually feel the difference, maybe 5 degrees warmer in the immediate vicinity of the engine. Mikhail bends down and looks underneath. Good, he says. No leaks, no problems. You'll need fuel soon, though. Maybe this afternoon. The fuel situation in Oymyakon is another complication you're still wrapping your head around. Gasoline is problematic because it becomes less volatile in extreme cold. It doesn't vaporize properly, making engines hard to start. Diesel is better in some ways but has its own issues. It begins to gel at around -15 degrees Celsius and turns into a waxy sludge at colder temperatures. The diesel sold here is specially formulated with additives to lower its gel point. But even then, it's not perfect. Some locals add kerosene to their diesel, or even gasoline, creating custom blends that they swear by. How much fuel do you use? You ask Mikhail. Just idling like this? Maybe 3-4 liters per day, he says. Sometimes more if it's very cold and the engine works harder. Over a winter, maybe 500 liters just for idling, plus whatever you use for driving. You do the math. 500 liters is about 130 gallons. At current prices, inflated by the cost of transportation to this remote location, that's roughly 25,000 rubles, or about $250. That's just for keeping your car ready to drive. Actually, driving it costs extra. In a place where the average monthly salary might be 30,000 rubles, spending 25,000 just to keep your vehicle from becoming a frozen paperweight is a significant burden. Back inside, Mikhail sets about making breakfast, and you watch the process with fascination. The kitchen is the warmest room aside from the main living area, heated by both the wood stove and a small gas stove used for cooking. The gas is propane, delivered in tanks because natural gas pipelines don't reach this far into the wilderness. The water situation is its own saga. Mikhail has a large plastic barrel in the kitchen, filled with water that he hauled from a communal water point yesterday. The water point is one of several locations in the village where water is delivered by truck. Yes, delivered by truck, because there's no municipal water system. The water comes from the Indijurka River, and the truck makes rounds to various neighborhoods, filling up communal tanks. In summer, Mikhail explains, the water is easy. The river flows, the truck fills up, we fill our barrels. But in winter, he gestures to the barrel. The water inside is liquid, but barely. We keep it in the warmest spot, and we use it carefully. If the house gets too cold, it will freeze. And then we have a 200-liter block of ice to deal with. This has happened to him before, he admits. One winter, his wood stove went out while he was visiting relatives in Yakutsk. He was gone for 4 days. When he returned, everything liquid in his house had frozen solid water, tea, a bottle of vodka that was insufficiently strong. It took him a week to restore normalcy, melting ice, rewarming the house, checking for burst pipes. Historians still argue whether humans are truly adapted to live in environments like this, or whether we're simply stubborn enough to survive anywhere through sheer determination and technological intervention. Mikhail's house is a small fortress, a bubble of survivability maintained through constant effort. Constant burning of wood, constant monitoring of temperatures, constant vigilance against the encroachment of ice. You sip your tea and watch the morning routine unfold, realizing that you've been awake for less than an hour and you've already scraped ice off your pillow, risked frostbite in an outhouse, checked on a perpetually running vehicle, and witnessed the careful management of water that could freeze solid if neglected. And the sun hasn't even risen yet. This is Oymyakon. This is your morning, and you're only just beginning to understand what it means to live here. Breakfast in Oymyakon is not what you're used to. There's no running to the fridge for eggs, no turning on the tap for a glass of orange juice, no casual browsing of the pantry while you decide what you're in the mood for. Every meal here is a calculated exercise in resource management and thermodynamics, and breakfast might be the most complicated meal of all because you're doing it while still half frozen from sleep, in a kitchen that's warm only by comparison to the Arctic hellscape outside. Mikhail pulls a package from the freezer, which is really just a box on the enclosed porch, because why waste electricity on a freezer when the entire outdoors is colder than any appliance could achieve? He unwraps it to reveal what looks like a log of red and white striped stone. Stroganina, he announces with evident pride. Frozen raw fish, the breakfast of champions. You've heard of stroganina, a traditional dish of the indigenous peoples of Siberia, but seeing it is different from hearing about it. This particular specimen is broad whitefish, caught from the Indigirka River last autumn when the fish were running. The fish was gutted and cleaned, then simply left outside to freeze. No cooking, no curing with salt or smoke, just pure, instant freezing. At these temperatures, the fish freezes so quickly that ice crystals don't have time to form large structures that would rupture the cell walls. The result is fish that, when thawed, is nearly as fresh as the moment it was caught. But you're not thawing it. That's the whole point of stroganina. Mikhail takes a long, sharp knife and begins shaving paper-thin slices from the frozen fish. The slices curl as they come off the blade, looking like pale pink ribbons. He arranges them on a plate alongside a small bowl of salt mixed with black pepper. You eat it frozen, he explains, seeing your hesitation. Dip it in the salt, put it in your mouth, let it melt on your tongue. The texture is, well, you'll see. You pick up a slice. It's rigid, brittle, and so cold that it briefly sticks to your fingers. You dip it in the salt mixture and place it in your mouth, and the experience is genuinely bizarre. For the first few seconds, it's just cold, extremely cold, almost painfully cold. Your tongue wants to reject it, but you hold it there, and slowly the fish begins to thaw from your body heat. The texture transforms from rigid to soft, from frozen to tender. The flavor emerges gradually, clean, slightly sweet, with a richness that surprises you. The salt and pepper cut through the fat, providing contrast. Good, yes? Mikhail asks, already preparing more slices. You nod because it is good in a way you didn't expect. It's also practical in a way that makes perfect sense once you think about it. In a place where fuel is expensive and cooking requires precious heat, why not eat food that's already been perfectly preserved by the environment? The indigenous Yakut and Evenk peoples figured this out centuries ago, long before anyone else arrived. They understood that extreme cold could be an ally rather than just an enemy. Mikhail sets a pot of water on the gas stove for tea. Always tea. Tea is the universal constant, the social lubricant and warming agent that keeps this society functioning. While the water heats, he explains the economics of food in Oymyakon, and the numbers are sobering. Everything that isn't hunted, fished, or foraged locally must be transported from Yakutsk or beyond. That's 920 kilometers over roads that are only reliably passable in winter when the ground is frozen solid. The same roads that turn into impassable mud bogs during the brief summer. Transport costs are enormous, and those costs get passed directly to consumers. A kilogram of apples might cost 300 rubles here versus 80 rubles in Yakutsk. Milk is a luxury. Fresh vegetables are essentially science fiction for most of the year. We eat what makes sense, Mikhail says. pouring boiling water over loose tea leaves. Fish, reindeer, horse meat, things that keep well frozen. Things we can get locally. In summer, we have the garden, potatoes, carrots, some cabbage if we're lucky. We preserve what we can. But winter is fish and meat, mostly. The reindeer and horses he mentions are semi-domesticated herds that roam the surrounding tundra, tended by local herders. The animals are incredibly hardy, adapted to survive on the sparse vegetation that manages to grow during the brief summer. When an animal is slaughtered, it's butchered and immediately frozen, providing meat that will keep for months without refrigeration because, again, everything is refrigeration. You ask about the water you heard rumbling to a boil, and Mikhail lifts the pot, showing you how he's only heated about a liter. Never waste hot water, he says. Every bit of heat takes fuel. You heat what you need, nothing extra. This philosophy extends to everything. The lights are LED bulbs, efficient and long-lasting. The house is insulated with every material imaginable. The walls are double-layered with sawdust packed between them, an old but effective technique. Windows are double-paned, and some people even add a third layer of plastic film in winter. As you eat your stroganina and drink your tea, Mikhail mentions almost casually that the pipes froze last night. Not the water delivery pipes, those don't exist. He means the pipes that drain water from the kitchen sink. The sink does have plumbing of a sort, but it's a one-way system. Water goes down the drain and into a collection tank beneath the house, which must be periodically emptied. Or rather, which must be periodically emptied when it's not frozen solid. Happens every winter, Mikhail says with the resignation of someone who has fought this battle many times. The drain pipe runs through an unheated space under the floor. Even with insulation, if we use too much water at once, or if it gets cold enough, the pipe freezes. Then we wait for a warmer day to thaw it, or we pour hot water down the drain until it clears. You look at the sink with new understanding. Even something as simple as washing dishes is fraught with complications here. Use too much water and you might freeze your drain. Don't use enough heat in the water and grease will solidify in the pipes. Every action has consequences. Every convenience comes with caveats. Mikhail notices your expression and laughs. You're wondering why we stay, yes? Everyone wonders this. People from Moscow, from Europe, they always ask, why don't you leave? Why live like this? You admit that the question has crossed your mind, though you've been too polite to voice it. This is home, he says simply. My parents were born here. My grandparents. This is where I understand how things work. In Yakutsk, in Moscow, I would be lost. I wouldn't know when to bring the reindeer in, when the fish are running, which berries are safe to eat. Here, I know things. Here, I am competent. He pauses, sipping his tea. Also, the city is expensive and crowded, and everyone is in a hurry. Here we have time. We have space. We have. He searches for the word. Clarity. There's something to what he's saying, you think. Life here is hard, brutally hard, but it's also simple in a way. The challenges are obvious. Stay warm, find food, don't freeze to death. There's no ambiguity. No existential crisis about the meaning of your work or the purpose of your existence. Every day you survive, and survival is its own justification. The tea is warming you from the inside, and you're starting to feel almost comfortable when Mikhail stands and moves to the window. He scrapes away some of the interior frost with his fingernail. A casual gesture he's probably performed 10,000 times, and peers outside. Getting light, he observes. It's nearly 9:30 a.m. and the darkness is indeed beginning to lift, transitioning from black to deep blue to a pale gray. By 10 a.m., you'll have something approximating daylight, though the sun will remain low on the horizon, providing illumination but little warmth. After breakfast, there's the matter of dealing with the frozen drain. Mikhail puts a large pot of water on to boil. More fuel consumed, more resources expended. While it heats, he explains the technique. You pour the boiling water down the drain in stages, allowing it time to melt the ice blockage without shocking the pipes too severely. Pour too fast, and you risk cracking the frozen pipe with thermal expansion. Pour too slow, and the water will cool and freeze before it can clear the blockage. It's an art, he says, and you can tell he means it. Everything here is an art, starting engines, managing heat, keeping water liquid, preserving food. Survival at -50 degrees Celsius isn't a matter of following simple rules. It's a complex skill set developed over generations. The water reaches a rolling boil, and Mikhail carefully pours about a quarter of it down the drain. You hear it gurgle and hiss as it encounters the ice. He waits 30 seconds, then pours another quarter. Wait, pour. Wait, pour. After the fourth pour, he runs some lukewarm water from the tap, water from the barrel that's been sitting in the warm kitchen, and it drains freely. Success. Good for now, he says. Maybe it will freeze again tonight, maybe not. We'll see. You're learning that maybe is a common word here. Maybe the car will start tomorrow. Maybe the pipes will freeze. Maybe the storm will arrive, maybe it won't. Life in Oymyakon requires a high tolerance for uncertainty, a willingness to accept that many things are beyond your control. You do what you can, you prepare, you insulate, you keep the stove burning, but ultimately the environment is sovereign, and you are just a small, warm creature trying to persist in a place that would really prefer you weren't here. Later in the morning, Mikhail's neighbor, Victor, stops by. He's brought horse meat, a large, frozen section of haunch that he's wrapped in cloth. The men conduct a brief negotiation in Russian that you don't fully follow, but which concludes with Mikhail handing over what looks like a container of fuel and some cash. Trade economy, you realize. Victor has meat from a horse his cousin slaughtered last week. Mikhail has extra diesel from a good deal he struck with a delivery driver. These transactions keep the community functioning, a web of mutual dependence where money is only one form of currency among many. Victor eyes you with curiosity. The visitor, he says in Russian, which your phone translates. How are you finding our paradise? You answer honestly, cold, challenging, but fascinating. Victor laughs. A deep belly laugh that seems incongruous with the harsh environment. Cold, he repeats. You should come in summer. Then it's hot and muddy and the mosquitoes will carry you away. We have 2 seasons here. Too cold to live and too buggy to live. But somehow we live. This is apparently a local joke because both men find it hilarious. You smile, though you're also filing away this information about summer. You'd imagine that summer in Oymyakon would be a relief, a blessed reprieve from the cold. But apparently, it's just a different kind of hardship, warmth that melts the permafrost into boggy soup, insects that emerge in clouds so thick they can suffocate livestock, and the ever-present challenge of preserving food without the natural deep freeze of winter. After Victor leaves, Mikhail shows you the refrigerator on the porch. Really just a large wooden box where the horse meat will now live until it's needed. Temperature controlled, he jokes, gesturing to the frozen outdoors. Never breaks down, costs nothing to run. You examine the meat, which is frozen so solid it could be used as a weapon. To prepare it, you'll need to either saw it into smaller pieces while frozen. Mikhail has a special saw for this purpose, hanging on the wall, or let a section slowly thaw in the kitchen over several hours. Cooking frozen meat directly is possible but inefficient, requiring more fuel and time. The morning is advancing toward afternoon now, and you've learned more about food preservation and resource management than you learned in months of normal life back home. You've seen how breakfast can be simultaneously simple and complex, how a frozen fish becomes a delicacy, how boiling water becomes a precision tool, how every meal is planned not just for taste but for thermal efficiency and storage capacity. You think about your own kitchen back home, the abundance of it, the waste of it, the refrigerator running 24/7, consuming electricity to keep food cool, the water that flows endlessly from the tap, hot or cold at the turn of a handle, the garbage disposal, the microwave, the toaster, all these devices consuming energy as if energy were infinite, as if heat and light and convenience were birthright rather than privilege. Here, every calorie of heat is earned. Every drop of liquid water is a small miracle, kept from freezing only through constant vigilance. And every meal is a reminder that humans are, at base, fragile tropical animals trying to survive in a world that extends far beyond the warm zones we're adapted for. Mikhail refills your tea. The pot has stayed warm on the stove, and you accept it gratefully. The cup warms your hands, and the liquid warms your core, and for a moment, sitting in this kitchen at the edge of human habitation, you feel something like contentment. It won't last. The cold never stops, the challenges never cease. But right now, with hot tea and a full stomach and the wood stove crackling nearby, you understand just a little why someone might choose to stay in this impossible place. The human mind is a strange and adaptable thing. You've been in Oymyakon for 3 days now, and already you're noticing shifts in your perception, small recalibrations of what your brain considers normal. That first morning, minus 52 degrees Celsius felt like a death sentence. This morning, when Mikhail announced it was minus 48 degrees Celsius, your first thought was genuinely, oh nice, a warm day. This is how it begins, the psychological transformation required to exist in a place that should, by all reasonable measures, be uninhabitable. You're sitting at the kitchen table, nursing another cup of tea, watching the weak sunlight filter through the frost-covered window. It's 11 a.m., and the sun has been up for about an hour, though up is a generous description for something that barely clears the horizon. The light is pale, thin, almost apologetic, as if the sun itself is embarrassed about how little warmth it can provide. In another 3 hours, it will begin setting again, and you'll have 19 more hours of darkness to endure. The darkness is getting to you. You can feel it, a weight pressing on your thoughts, a subtle dimming of your mood that has nothing to do with depression and everything to do with biology. Your body is confused. Your circadian rhythms, evolved over millions of years to respond to reliable patterns of light and dark, are receiving signals that don't make sense. 19 hours of darkness followed by 5 hours of twilight is not a pattern any human ancestor ever experienced with regularity. Your pineal gland is pumping out melatonin like it's going out of style, making you constantly drowsy, constantly ready for sleep. Vitamin D, Mikhail says, seeming to read your mind. He reaches into a cupboard and pulls out a large bottle of supplements. Everyone takes it. Otherwise, we'd all be crazy by February. He tosses you the bottle. 2 per day with food. Doctor's orders. Not that we have a doctor here, but the nurse who visits says the same thing. You examine the bottle. It's a high-dose formulation, 2,000 IU per capsule. Back home, you might take this during winter if you remembered, which you usually didn't. Here, it's not optional. Without supplementation, everyone would develop rickets, weakened bones, compromised immune systems, and probably severe depression. The human body needs sunlight to produce vitamin D, and you're getting approximately 0 meaningful sunlight. Historians still argue whether pre-industrial peoples living in extreme latitudes suffered from vitamin D deficiency, or whether their diets, rich in fish, organs, and other sources of dietary vitamin D compensated adequately. The archaeological evidence is mixed. Some skeletal remains show signs of deficiency, others don't. What's clear is that modern residents of places like Oymyakon, with more restricted diets and less organ meat consumption, need supplementation to remain healthy. But vitamin D is just one piece of the psychological puzzle. The isolation is another. Oymyakon has roughly 500 residents, and in winter, this population becomes even smaller as some families leave for Yakutsk or other cities where they have relatives. The village feels empty, post-apocalyptic. You can walk for 5 minutes and see no one, hear nothing except the crunch of your boots on snow and the sound of your own breathing inside your face mask. The social fabric here is tight by necessity. Everyone knows everyone, and privacy is a luxury few can afford. If someone's stove goes out, the whole neighborhood knows within hours because the smoke plume disappears. If someone's car breaks down, someone else will stop to help because leaving a person stranded in these temperatures is essentially leaving them to die. This interdependence creates a kind of forced community that you suspect would be claustrophobic in a warmer climate, but here feels like survival. Mikhail tells you about winters past, about the psychological toll. The first winter is hardest, he says. Not the first winter of your life. Babies born here adapt naturally. But the first winter as an adult who chose to come here, that's difficult. People from Yakutsk who marry someone local, they sometimes can't handle it. I've seen 3 marriages end because the spouse from outside couldn't take the darkness, the cold, the isolation. He tells you about a teacher who came from Moscow 5 years ago, a young woman with idealistic notions about serving remote communities. She lasted until January, then had what he delicately calls a difficult time. She became convinced that the sun wasn't coming back, that they were all trapped in eternal darkness. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating, just sat by the window staring at the frozen landscape. They had to medevac her out to Yakutsk, and as far as Mikhail knows, she never returned to teaching. The mind plays tricks, he explains. The darkness makes you think things that aren't true. You forget what warmth feels like. You start to believe that this, he gestures at the frozen world outside, is all there is, all there ever was, all there ever will be. You're beginning to understand what he means. 3 days in, and already your memories of warmth are becoming abstract. You remember intellectually that summer exists, that there are places where people wear shorts and swim in lakes and complain about heat. But you can't quite feel the memory anymore. It's like trying to recall a dream. You know it happened, but the sensory details are slipping away. To combat this psychological erosion, the people of Oymyakon have developed coping mechanisms. Social gatherings are frequent and almost mandatory. Every few days, someone hosts a meal or a tea session, and attendance is expected unless you have a very good reason to decline. These gatherings serve multiple purposes. They ensure everyone is still alive and sane. They provide an opportunity to share resources and information, and they offer a brief respite from the isolation. Mikhail is hosting such a gathering tonight. 6 or 7 people will crowd into his main room, bringing food to share, drinking tea and stronger beverages, talking for hours. You'll meet Olga, he says. She's 93, born here in 1932. She remembers when they recorded the minus 67.7 degrees Celsius in 1933. She was just a baby, but she's heard the stories her whole life. The idea of someone living for 93 years in this environment is staggering to you. 93 winters of scraping ice off pillows, of frozen outhouses, of darkness and isolation. 93 years of keeping the stove burning, of managing water barrels, of layering clothing just to step outside. The psychological resilience required is beyond what you thought humans were capable of. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps humans are capable of extraordinary adaptation when necessary. You think about other extreme environments where people live, the Bedouin in the Sahara, the Inuit in the Arctic, mountain communities in the Himalayas. Every one of these environments would kill an unprepared person quickly, yet people not only survive but build cultures, raise families, find meaning and even joy. The afternoon passes slowly. You spend some time reading a book you brought with you, but concentration is difficult. Your mind wanders. You find yourself staring at the frost patterns on the window, thinking about nothing in particular, or perhaps thinking about everything in an unfocused way. This, too, is an adaptation, a kind of mental hibernation, a conservation of cognitive energy when there's not much to think about. Around 3 p.m., Mikhail announces he needs to check on his fish traps. He has several traps set in the Indijurka River, which despite everything is still flowing under a thick layer of ice. The river, fed by underground springs and moving constantly, doesn't freeze solid the way still water would. But accessing it requires drilling or chopping through ice that can be more than a meter thick. You volunteer to join him, partly out of curiosity and partly because the cabin is feeling oppressively small. Mikhail looks skeptical. It's colder now, he warns. Afternoon is coldest, when the sun is setting. Maybe minus 55 degrees Celsius by the river where the wind hits. You insist. You need to move, need to do something, need to engage with the environment even if that environment is actively hostile. Sitting inside is safe but suffocating. Mikhail shrugs your funeral and begins the layering process. 20 minutes later, you're outside, and immediately you understand his warning. The cold is different now, sharper, more aggressive. The sun is beginning its early descent, and what little warmth it provided, psychological more than actual, is fading. Your face is covered except for your eyes, which are protected by ski goggles, but you can still feel the cold probing for weakness. The walk to the river takes 15 minutes, following a path marked by stakes driven into the snow. Other people have walked this path recently. You can see the boot prints, frozen solid in the snow. Each print is a small sculpture, preserving the tread pattern perfectly in ice. The river, when you reach it, is both beautiful and eerie. The ice covering it is thick and opaque, but in some places you can see darker areas where the ice is thinner or where water is moving faster beneath. Steam rises from cracks in the ice. The river water is probably around 1 degree Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius, which is warm compared to the air, so it produces visible vapor. Mikhail moves to one of his trap locations, marked by a stick protruding from the ice. He has a special ice drill, essentially an oversized auger, and begins the laborious process of drilling through. The drill bites into the ice with a grinding sound, producing shavings that immediately freeze into hard pellets. After several minutes of drilling, during which both of you are breathing hard and actually working up a hint of warmth despite the cold, the drill breaks through. Water wells up through the hole, steaming in the frigid air. Mikhail pulls up his trap, a simple wire cage designed to let fish swim in but not out. Inside are 3 fish, broad whitefish, frozen into immobility by the cold water. He empties them into a bag, which immediately becomes another frozen lump, and resets the trap with fresh bait. Bits of old fish he's brought in a container. Not a great catch, he admits, but it's something. In spring, when the fish are running to spawn, we can catch dozens in a day. Now, we're lucky to get a few. The entire operation takes maybe 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes feel like an hour. The cold has penetrated every layer you're wearing. Your feet, despite 2 pairs of socks and insulated boots, are numb. Your hands, despite multiple gloves, are clumsy and painful. Your face, where exposed around the goggles, feels like it's being burned. On the walk back, you notice that your thoughts are becoming sluggish. The cold is affecting your cognition, slowing your neural processing. This is mildly alarming. You're experiencing firsthand what hypothermia feels like in its early stages. Not dangerous yet, but a warning sign. Your body is diverting blood away from your extremities and brain to protect your core temperature. Back inside, the warmth hits you like a physical force. Your skin tingles and burns as blood flow returns to your extremities. Your fingers hurt, genuinely hurt, with the pins and needles sensation of returning circulation. You strip off your outer layers in the mudroom, and Mikhail hands you tea with a knowing look. The river is harder than walking around the village, he says. The wind off the water makes it worse. But we need the fish, so we go. You sit at the kitchen table, cradling the tea, waiting for your core temperature to stabilize. Your thoughts are slowly returning to normal speed, the fog lifting. This is the psychological reality of Oymyakon. You're constantly balancing on the edge of your body's capabilities. Push too far, stay out too long, and you'll die. But stay inside all the time, and you'll go insane from isolation and inactivity. Mikhail is processing the fish now, gutting them at the kitchen sink, working efficiently. The guts will go to his neighbor's dog, one of the few animals tough enough to live outside year-round, though even it has a small heated shelter. The fish meat will be frozen and added to the growing supply. As you watch him work, you realize that this is the psychological adaptation. Finding purpose in small tasks, taking satisfaction in minor successes like 3 fish from a trap, measuring your day by tiny victories over the cold. It's a kind of mindfulness, forced upon you by circumstances, that makes you acutely aware of every moment, every action, every small comfort. Later, as the gathering time approaches and Mikhail begins preparing the main room for visitors, you understand another layer of the psychological strategy. Ritual. The gathering will follow a predictable pattern. Tea first, then food, then conversation, perhaps some vodka, more conversation, and finally, as late as midnight, people will bundle up and walk home through the darkness. These rituals provide structure, give the mind something to anticipate, create markers in time that prevent one frozen day from blurring into the next. You're learning to survive not just physically but mentally, and you're beginning to suspect that the mental challenge might be harder than the physical one. The school bell rings at 8:30 a.m. Though bell is perhaps too cheerful a word for the electronic buzzer that echoes through Oymykon's only school building. Outside, it's minus 58 degrees Celsius. Cold enough that the air feels thick, almost resistant when you try to breathe it, even through your layers of scarves and masks. The sun won't rise for another hour and a half, so the children are walking to school in complete darkness, their flashlights creating small pools of light that bob and weave through the village streets like fireflies in hell. You're standing near the school entrance with Mikhail, watching the students arrive, and what you're witnessing seems to violate several laws you thought were universal. Children, actual children, some as young as 6 or 7, are walking through temperatures that would kill an adult in under an hour if improperly dressed. They're laughing. Some of them are running, which seems physically impossible given the layers they're wearing. But there they go, racing each other to the door, their breath creating small clouds that freeze and drift behind them like contrails. School closes at -55 degrees Celsius. Mikhail explains. Colder than that, it's too dangerous for the younger ones to walk. But -58 degrees Celsius. Close, but not quite. You do the math in your head. 3 degrees Celsius. 3 degrees separate safe enough for children from too dangerous for children. The margin of error in this place is razor thin. A girl who looks about 10 years old approaches. Her name is Yakutia, and she's Mikhail's neighbor's daughter. She's bundled in what appears to be an entire wardrobe. Pants over pants, sweaters over sweaters, a coat that makes her look twice her actual size. Only her eyes are visible between her hat and scarf, and even her eyelashes are white with frost. "Good morning, Uncle Mikhail," she calls out, her voice muffled by the fabric. She spots you and switches to carefully practiced English. "Hello, you are the visitor, yes? From warm place." You confirm that yes, you're from a warm place, and no, you're not yet accustomed to the cold. This seems to delight her immensely. She laughs, actually laughs, and says something in Russian to her friends, who also laugh. You're a curiosity, an exotic creature from a world where water doesn't freeze on contact with air. It's not so bad. Yakutia insists in English. In summer, very hot. 25 degrees. We swim in river. She makes swimming motions with her heavily gloved hands, then waves goodbye and disappears into the school building with her friends. 25 degrees Celsius. That's 77 degrees Fahrenheit. She considers this very hot. The temperature swing here between summer and winter is over 80 degrees Celsius, nearly 150 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like living on a different planet, where the seasons aren't just changes in weather, but fundamental transformations of reality itself. Inside the school, you've been invited to observe classes. The building is Soviet-era construction, built in the 1960s when Oymyakon was being developed as a showcase of human adaptation to extreme environments. It's heated by a central boiler system that burns coal, and the interior is kept at a steady 22 degrees Celsius. Warm enough for comfort, but not so warm that children will be shocked when they go back outside. The entrance has a mudroom that's more like a decompression chamber. Students must remove their outer layers here, hanging them on hooks that line the walls. The room is a maze of coats, hats, scarves, boots, hundreds of items, all carefully labeled with names because in this uniform of survival, everything looks the same. The transformation from outdoor creature to indoor student takes each child about 5 minutes. Off comes the outer coat, revealing a second coat. Off comes that, revealing a heavy sweater. Pants are unzipped, special pants with full-length zippers, to reveal regular pants underneath. Boots come off, revealing felt liners that are removed and hung up to dry, exposing normal shoes. It's like watching caterpillars emerge from cocoons, these small, manageable children appearing from within the bulky protective layers. You follow a group into a classroom where a history lesson is underway. The teacher, a woman in her 40s named Svetlana, is explaining the history of Oymyakon itself. You settle in the back, and your translator app works overtime to render her words into English. Our village, she explains, was not always permanent. The indigenous Evenks and Yakuts were nomadic, following reindeer herds. They would camp here in winter because of the unfrozen water source, the thermal spring, but they didn't stay year-round. Permanent settlement began in the 1920s and 1930s when the Soviet government forced nomadic peoples to settle in fixed locations. A student raises her hand. Why did the Soviets want people to live here permanently? Control. Svetlana answers simply. Nomadic people are hard to govern, hard to tax, hard to educate in Soviet ideology. Fixed settlements made administration easier. Also, there were mineral resources to extract and workers were needed. Many of the first permanent residents were prisoners from the Gulag system, sent here to mine gold and tin. This is the darker history of Oymyakon, the part that doesn't make it into the coldest inhabited place tourist narratives. This village exists partly because the Soviet Union decided it should exist, not because it was a natural or sensible place for people to live. The prisoners died in massive numbers. Exact figures are disputed, but historians estimate that hundreds of thousands perished in the Kolyma camps, of which Oymyakon was a peripheral outpost. Those who survived their sentences sometimes stayed, having nowhere else to go, no family to return to, or having adapted so thoroughly to the extreme cold that they couldn't imagine living anywhere else. The lesson continues, moving to more recent history. Svetlana talks about the 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed and suddenly the subsidies that had made life in Oymyakon possible vanished. Food supplies dwindled. Fuel became scarce. The population dropped by nearly half as people fled to cities. Those who remained learned to survive without external support, rediscovering old hunting and fishing techniques their grandparents had practiced. My parents almost left, one student volunteers, but my grandfather said, "Where would we go? To Yakutsk to live in a small apartment and work at a factory? Here we have space, we have freedom, we know how to survive." So we stayed. This is a common sentiment you're learning. The people who remain in Oymyakon are here by choice now, not by Soviet decree. They could leave, transportation exists, other places have jobs and opportunities, but they stay because this is home, because they possess knowledge and skills that are valuable here but would be useless anywhere else, because the idea of living in a crowded city feels more impossible than surviving at minus 60 degrees Celsius. The bell rings and it's recess. Recess. You follow the students outside, half convinced that this must be a joke. It's now minus 57 degrees Celsius. The sun has finally risen but provides only dim, anemic light, and the children are going outside to play. They bundle back up, though not as thoroughly as for the walk to school, because they'll only be outside for 15 minutes, and pour into the schoolyard. And then, incredibly, they play. They run around, they laugh, they engage in some kind of tag game that seems to involve a lot of chasing and shrieking. Their breath creates a fog bank over the playground, a cloud of frozen exhalations that hovers in the still air. They're adapted, Svetlana says, standing next to you. She's come outside too, though she's staying near the door and not venturing into the playground. Children born here have slightly different physiology. Studies have shown larger lung capacity, more efficient oxygen utilization, better circulation to extremities. It's not genetic or not entirely genetic, but developmental. Their bodies learn to function in the cold during crucial growth years. You watch a boy who can't be more than 8 years old. He's climbed to the top of a snow pile and is now sliding down it on his rear, clearly having the time of his life. His cheeks are red, but not the dangerous, frostbite red, just the healthy flush of exertion. He's wearing what seems like insufficient clothing by your standards, but he's obviously comfortable. Don't they get frostbite? You ask. Sometimes, Svetlana admits. We watch for it. Teachers are trained to recognize the signs. Pale skin, numbness, tingling. We bring children inside immediately if we see symptoms. But honestly, the children are better at self-regulating than adults give them credit for. They know when they're too cold. They come inside before it becomes dangerous. Historians still argue whether human populations can truly adapt to extreme environments within a few generations, or whether what appears as adaptation is simply learned behavior and cultural practice. The evidence from Oymyakon suggests it's a combination. Genetic factors may play a role, but most of the adaptation is cultural knowledge passed down through families, teaching children from birth how to dress, how to breathe, how to recognize danger signs in their own bodies. Recess ends, and the children file back inside, bringing with them a blast of cold air and a lot of frozen moisture that immediately begins forming puddles as it melts. The mudroom becomes a steamy, wet chaos as they shed their outer layers again. No one seems bothered by the disruption. This is normal. This is just how school works when it's cold enough to freeze your lungs. The next class is mathematics, and you observe the lesson with fascination. The problems are the same as you'd find in any school: algebra, geometry, basic calculus for the older students, but the word problems have a distinct local flavor. If Dmitry uses 4 liters of diesel per day to keep his truck idling, and diesel costs 42 rubles per liter, how much does he spend in a week? Or, a fish trap can hold 8 fish before it needs to be emptied. If Ivan checks his traps every 3 days and catches an average of 2 fish per trap per day, how many traps does he need to catch 50 fish per week? These aren't random problems pulled from a textbook. They're practical applications of mathematics to real survival situations. The students solve them with the kind of focus that comes from understanding that these skills might actually matter someday. Mathematics isn't abstract here. It's the difference between having enough fuel to last the winter or running out in February with 2 months of cold still ahead. During lunch, you eat with the students in the cafeteria. The food is hearty bread, soup with chunks of fish and potato, tea, and for dessert, small cookies that must have been brought in from Yakutsk. The students eat with enthusiasm, their metabolisms running hot from the constant work of keeping their bodies warm. You notice that portion sizes are larger than what you'd see in a school elsewhere. These children are burning calories at an extraordinary rate just by existing in this environment. A group of older students, teenagers maybe 14 or 15, invite you to their table. They want to practice English and ask you questions about the outside world. What's the weather like where you live? Have you been to America? What do you think of Oymyakon? You answer honestly. It's cold beyond anything you imagined, harder than you expected, but also fascinating. The students nod, understanding. One girl, Anya, tells you she wants to study medicine in Yakutsk, maybe even Moscow. But I'll come back, she insists. Someone needs to be the doctor here. Right now, we only have a nurse who visits monthly. It's not enough. Her friend Maxim disagrees. I'm leaving and never coming back, he declares. I want to live somewhere warm, where I don't have to wear 5 layers just to walk outside. Maybe Cyprus. I heard it never gets cold there. This debate, you learn, is common among the younger generation. Some feel a deep connection to Oymyakon and can't imagine living anywhere else. Others see it as a prison, a place of unnecessary hardship when easier options exist. The tension between these perspectives shapes every family, every decision about education and career and future. After lunch, you observe a physical education class. In many schools, this would mean running around a gym or playing basketball. Here, it means survival skills training. The instructor, a man in his 50s with the weathered face of someone who's spent his life outdoors, is teaching students how to start a fire in extreme cold. You have 2 minutes, he tells them. In real conditions, if you're stranded, if your vehicle breaks down, you might have only minutes before hypothermia sets in. You need to be able to start a fire fast. The students work in pairs, using birch bark, which burns even when frozen, and small twigs they've brought from outside. They use ferro rods, striking them to create sparks. Some succeed quickly, their fires catching and growing. Others struggle, their hands still clumsy with the technique. The instructor moves among them, correcting form, offering advice, occasionally taking over to demonstrate. This, he tells you during a break, is more important than any mathematics they'll learn. This is the difference between life and death. I've had former students tell me, I was stranded on the road, the engine died, but I remembered your class, and I built a fire, and I survived. Mathematics didn't save them. This did. The school day ends at 3 p.m., just as the sun is beginning its early descent. The children bundle up again, the reverse transformation from indoor student to outdoor survivor. They emerge into the darkness. It's fully dark now, the brief period of daylight already over, and begin their walks home, flashlights bobbing, voices calling to each other across the frozen streets. You watch them go, these resilient, adapted, impossible children who are growing up in conditions that would hospitalize most adults. They're learning mathematics and history and science, yes, but they're also learning something more fundamental, how to exist in a place that doesn't want them to exist. And they're succeeding, thriving, even proving that human adaptability has no real upper limit as long as the will to survive remains strong. Money is a strange concept when your car needs to idle continuously for 4 months straight just to remain functional. The economics of Oymyakon operate on principles that would baffle a conventional economist. And as you sit with Mikhail going over his monthly budget, you're beginning to understand just how expensive survival can be when the environment itself is actively trying to kill you. Diesel first, Mikhail says, tapping a worn notebook where he tracks expenses. Always diesel first. Without fuel, the car is dead. Without the car, I'm isolated. Isolated here means dead. Eventually, he shows you the numbers. Approximately 120 liters per month just for idling during the coldest months, plus another 80 liters for actual driving, trips to check fish traps, visits to neighbors, the occasional journey to a larger settlement for supplies. That's 200 liters total at 45 rubles per liter. 9,000 rubles, roughly $90. And that's just to keep one vehicle operational. Some families have 2 vehicles, he adds. One for daily use, one as backup in case the first fails. Double the fuel cost. But if your only vehicle dies and you have no backup, you're stranded. The heating costs are equally staggering. Mikhail burns approximately 12 cubic meters of wood per winter. He cuts some himself during summer, when the days are long and the permafrost surface has thawed enough to access forests. But he can't cut everything he needs. Time, equipment, and physical capability limit him. He has to purchase the rest. About 8,000 rubles for wood delivered from suppliers who operate in the forests surrounding Oymyakon. Add coal for backup heating and occasional use. Another 3,000 rubles. Food is where the economics become truly punishing. A kilogram of apples in Oymyakon costs 300 rubles. In Yakutsk, 80 rubles. Milk is 120 rubles per liter versus 65 rubles in the city. A loaf of bread is 85 rubles instead of 40. Everything that must be transported, which is nearly everything except locally caught fish and hunted meat, carries an enormous markup. The trucks only come when the road of bones is passable, Mikhail explains. That's maybe 8 months of the year if we're lucky. During the worst of winter, December through February, trucks sometimes don't come at all. Too dangerous, too cold, engines freeze despite everything. So stores charge whatever they want and we pay or we go without. He shows you his monthly food budget, 15,000 rubles, about $150. This would be a reasonable food budget in many places. But Mikhail is a single man who eats simply, who supplements his diet with fish he catches himself and meat he gets through trades with neighbors. A family of 4 might spend 35,000 rubles or more on food, a crippling expense when the average salary in Oymyakon is perhaps 40,000 rubles per month. How do people afford it? You ask. Mikhail shrugs. We survive. We fish, we hunt, we grow what we can in summer. We trade. I give Victor diesel, he gives me horse meat. Olga knits socks. She trades them for firewood from Pavel. Money is part of it, but not all of it. We have a... what's the word? Informal economy. Underground economy. Things that never appear in official records. This informal economy is what makes life in Oymyakon possible. Everyone has something to trade: skills, goods, labor, information. A mechanic might fix your truck in exchange for fresh fish. A seamstress might repair your winter gear for firewood. Someone with a reliable vehicle might drive you to Yakutsk in exchange for help building a shed next summer. Money changes hands, but so do favors, creating a complex web of obligations and reciprocity that binds the community together. The infrastructure costs are another burden, though these are mostly absorbed by the local government rather than individuals. The school must be heated, an enormous expense. The roads must be maintained, though maintained in this context means occasionally cleared of snow and marked with stakes. There's a small medical clinic, though it's staffed only once a month when a nurse makes the journey from Yakutsk. There's a generator that provides electricity to the village, running on diesel, consuming thousands of liters per month and occasionally breaking down, plunging everyone into darkness for days while repairs are made. The Soviet Union used to subsidize everything, Mikhail says. The government paid bonuses for people living in extreme conditions. They supplied food, fuel, everything. Life was easier then, in some ways. Harder in others, less freedom, always someone watching you, but easier economically. Now we're on our own. The government provides some support, but not much. We survive because we choose to, not because we're paid to. The economics of permafrost add yet another layer of expense. Every building in Oymyakon sits on stilts, elevated above the ground, because building directly on permafrost is a recipe for disaster. In summer, when the surface layer thaws, the ground becomes unstable, shifting and settling. A building sitting directly on this ground would crack and collapse within a few years. So everything is elevated on wooden or metal pilings driven deep into the permafrost, creating a gap between ground and structure. This design is expensive. Building a simple house costs easily twice what it would cost in a warmer climate, just because of the foundation requirements. And even with proper design, buildings don't last as long here. The constant freeze-thaw cycles, the extreme temperature variations, the moisture, it all takes a toll. A wooden house might last 30 years instead of 50. Metal corrodes faster. Concrete cracks. Mikhail takes you to see an abandoned house on the edge of the village. A cautionary tale of what happens when economics fail. The house belonged to a family who left in the 1990s when the Soviet support system collapsed. They simply walked away, unable to afford continued habitation. The house still stands, but it's slowly dying. The windows are broken, frost accumulating inside. The roof has partially collapsed under the weight of snow and ice. The pilings are beginning to shift as the permafrost beneath them goes through cycles without the stabilizing weight of occupation and heat. In 20 years, it will be gone, Mikhail predicts. The permafrost will reclaim it. Already, you can see. He points to where one corner of the structure has sunk, tilting the entire building at an unnatural angle. The ground is moving. Without heat to stabilize the foundation, without maintenance to repair damage, nature wins. This house is a reminder that human presence in Oymyakon is temporary, conditional, maintained only through constant effort and expense. Stop paying the costs, financial, physical, psychological, and the environment reasserts its dominance within months. The grocery store, when you visit it, is a study in scarcity economics. The shelves are perhaps half full, stocked with non-perishables that can survive the journey and the uncertain delivery schedule. Can goods dominate vegetables, fish, meat? There are dried goods, pasta, rice, flour. Some frozen items, kept frozen by the outdoor temperature rather than by refrigeration. Fresh produce is minimal and expensive. A few sad apples, some potatoes that have seen better days, onions and carrots that cost more per kilogram than beef would cost in Moscow. The store owner, a woman named Irina, explains the challenges. I order 3 months in advance, and I never know exactly what will arrive. The truck might bring everything I ordered, or it might bring half. Or the truck might not come at all, delayed by weather or mechanical problems. I have to charge high prices because my risk is high. If I stock fresh produce and the truck doesn't come for 6 weeks, I lose everything. She shows you her ledger and the math is sobering. Her profit margins are razor-thin despite the high prices. Transportation costs eat up most of the difference between what she pays suppliers and what she charges customers. She employs one assistant, paying him 25,000 rubles per month. Low by city standards but reasonable here given the cost of living. Some months she barely breaks even. She survives because she also runs a side business repairing small engines, because her husband catches fish they sell informally, because they own their building outright and don't pay rent. Why do it? You ask. Why run a store under these conditions? Irina looks at you like you've asked why she breathes. Because we need a store. If I close, where do people buy food? We're 920 kilometers from Yakutsk. Not everyone has a car, and even those who do can't make that trip every week. Someone has to run the store. It's me. This sense of community obligation underlies much of Oymyakon's economy. People don't do things purely for profit. They do them because they're needed, because the community would fail otherwise. The mechanic doesn't charge as much as he could because then people couldn't afford repairs. The store owner doesn't maximize profit because then people couldn't eat. The fishermen share their catch with those who can't fish themselves. It's not charity, exactly, and it's not pure altruism. It's enlightened self-interest. Everyone understands that if the community collapses, they all suffer. Mikhail introduces you to Pavel, a man in his 50s who runs what he calls a logistics business, which really means he has a truck and drives to Yakutsk regularly, buying supplies for people who can't make the trip themselves. He charges for the service 800 rubles plus fuel costs, but he also operates as an informal banker, courier, and news service. He brings back medicines, special order items, spare parts. He delivers letters and packages. He brings news of the outside world, reports of what's happening in Yakutsk, gossip about former residents who've moved away. I make maybe 40,000 rubles per month, Pavel says, but I work for it. The drive takes 2 days each way, for days round trip. I do it twice a month, sometimes 3 times if people need things urgently. In winter, it's dangerous. The road of bones is not a joke. Trucks go through the ice crossing rivers. Engines freeze despite all precautions. Whiteout conditions make navigation impossible. I've been stranded 3 times. Had to wait out storms in my truck for days. He shows you his truck. A massive UAZ all-terrain vehicle modified for extreme conditions. It has oversized tires, reinforced suspension, redundant heating systems for the engine, and enough spare parts bolted to the frame to rebuild half the vehicle in an emergency. The truck itself cost him 1.5 million rubles, about 15,000 US dollars, and he spends another 200,000 rubles per year on maintenance and upgrades. But it's worth it, he insists. This truck is my livelihood. It's also the lifeline for 30 families who depend on me to bring what they need. If my truck dies and I can't afford to fix it or replace it, those families suffer. So I maintain it religiously. I never push it beyond its limits. And I pray to whatever gods might be listening that it keeps running. The economics of Oymyakon are economics of survival, not wealth accumulation. Nobody here is getting rich. There are no luxury cars, no vacation homes, no investment portfolios. Money, when people have it, goes toward necessities: fuel, food, heat, maintenance. Any surplus, and surplus is rare, gets saved for emergencies because emergencies are inevitable. Your truck will break down. Your roof will need repair. Someone will get sick and need to be evacuated to Yakutsk for medical care. You think about your own economic life, back in the world of surplus and convenience. Your worries about retirement savings, about whether to upgrade your phone, about which streaming services to subscribe to. Here, those concerns would be absurd luxuries. The economic question in Oymyakon is simpler and more immediate. Will I have enough to survive the next 6 months? And if not, what can I do about it? As evening falls and you walk back to Mikhail's house, passing the small houses with their smoke plumes rising into the darkness, you realize that this entire village is an ongoing economic miracle. That 500 people manage to survive here, to feed themselves and heat their homes and maintain their vehicles and raise children and continue existing year after year despite the crushing costs, is a testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness. The environment wants you gone. The mathematics of cost versus benefit suggests you should leave. But the people stay, finding ways to make impossible economics work through innovation, cooperation, and sheer refusal to surrender to a hostile universe. Your smartphone is dead. Not low on battery. Completely dead. Frozen into an expensive brick despite being in your innermost pocket, pressed against your body heat. You discovered this when you tried to check the time and found the screen completely unresponsive, dark, lifeless. You brought it inside, set it near the wood stove, and waited 30 minutes for it to thaw. When it finally powered on, the battery indicator showed 3%, even though it was fully charged an hour ago. Welcome to technology in Oymyakon, where the machines you depend on in normal life become temperamental, fragile things that require constant babying. Mikhail watches your distress with barely concealed amusement. First rule, he says, phone stays inside your coat, against your skin, not in a pocket, actual skin contact. And you limit screen time to 30 seconds, maybe a minute maximum. Otherwise, battery dies. Every time. He shows you his own phone, a device that looks about 10 years old, a basic model with actual physical buttons rather than a touchscreen. Older phones are better, he explains. Less sophisticated electronics, simpler batteries. They handle cold better than these expensive smartphones. Young people buy iPhones and then they complain when their phones die. I tell them, you paid 60,000 rubles for a phone that doesn't work half the year. I paid 3,000 rubles for a phone that always works. They don't listen. This is the reality of technology in extreme cold. Modern devices, designed for comfortable room temperatures, simply fail. Lithium-ion batteries experience dramatic capacity loss below freezing. At minus 20 degrees Celsius, a battery might provide only 50% of its normal capacity. At minus 40 degrees Celsius or colder, The chemical reactions that generate electricity slow to a crawl or stop entirely. Your smartphone, engineered to operate between 0 degrees Celsius and 35 degrees Celsius, has no chance in minus 55 degrees Celsius air. But it's not just phones. Laptop computers are nearly useless here without constant heating. Cameras freeze. Mechanical shutters become sluggish. LCD screens dim and slow. Autofocus systems fail as lubricants thicken. Even digital cameras designed for cold weather struggle at Oymykon's temperatures. Professional photographers who visit here use specialized equipment with external battery packs kept warm against their bodies, connected by cables to the camera, and even then they work quickly, limiting exposure time to minutes. The internet connection in Oymykon is its own special kind of torture. The village has internet service, technically, provided by satellite. But it's the kind of internet that makes you nostalgic for dial-up. Latency is measured in seconds rather than milliseconds. Loading a simple web page can take minutes. Video streaming is essentially impossible. Video calls are a laggy, pixelated nightmare of frozen frames and disconnected audio. We have internet cafes in Yakutsk, jokes Victor, who stopped by for evening tea. Here we have internet waiting room. You send a request, you wait, maybe tomorrow you get response. The satellite system itself is a marvel of stubbornness over sense. The dish is mounted on a tower outside the community center, and it requires regular maintenance because ice accumulates on it, degrading signal quality. Someone, usually Pavel with his truck and ladder, has to climb up and clear the ice, a job nobody wants in minus 50 degrees Celsius temperatures 30 feet above frozen ground. The satellite connection costs the village approximately 80,000 rubles per month, subsidized partly by the regional government, partly by user fees. For this princely sum, the village gets internet speeds that wouldn't have been impressive in 2003. Young people complain most about internet, Mikhail observes. They want to watch videos, play games, video chat with friends in Yakutsk.
Impossible.
Some leave just because of this. They go to cities for university, get used to fast internet, and they can't come back. They can't tolerate being disconnected. Television reception is satellite-based as well, and slightly more reliable than internet, though still subject to disruptions during storms. Most people have satellite dishes, though some have given up on television entirely and rely on DVDs or downloaded content transferred via USB drives. There's an informal lending library of USB drives circulating through the village. People copy movies, TV shows, music, passing drives from house to house like samizdat literature in Soviet times. The vehicles in Oymykon represent a different kind of technological adaptation. Modern cars, with their computer-controlled engines and electronic fuel injection, are problematic here. All those sensors and chips and electronic controls don't appreciate extreme cold. So most residents drive older, simpler vehicles, UAZ trucks from the 1980s and 1990s, ancient Ladas, anything mechanical rather than electronic. These older vehicles can be maintained with basic tools and spare parts, and they don't throw error codes when exposed to temperatures their designers never imagined. Pavel shows you his truck's engine compartment, which looks like a Mad Max fever dream of modifications. There's the standard engine, yes, but also auxiliary heaters, extra insulation, modified fuel lines with heating elements, redundant battery systems, and various other additions that turn a simple truck into a survival vehicle. This heating system, he explains, pointing to a device connected to the engine block, keeps coolant circulating and warm even when engine is off. Runs on diesel, uses about half a liter per hour. Without this, engine block would freeze solid overnight. With it, I can turn engine off for few hours if needed, restart without problem. The battery situation is particularly complex. Standard car batteries lose most of their capacity in extreme cold. The same lithium-ion problems that plague phones affect vehicle batteries too. So trucks here often run multiple batteries wired in parallel, providing redundancy. Some people bring their batteries inside at night, carrying 50 pounds of battery up to their house, keeping it warm near the stove, then carrying it back out in the morning. Pavel thinks this is excessive and says so, but he admits knowing people who swear by it. Diesel fuel, as mentioned before, turns to gel at low temperatures. The fuel sold in Oymykon is Arctic-grade diesel, formulated to remain liquid down to minus 55 degrees Celsius. But even this specialty fuel becomes sluggish and cloudy at extreme temperatures, flowing slowly and clogging filters. Pavel's truck has fuel line heaters, electric heating cables wrapped around the fuel lines to keep fuel flowing freely. He also has multiple fuel filters that can be changed quickly when one clogs, because a clogged fuel filter in -60 degrees Celsius, 20 kilometers from anywhere, means you're sitting in a metal box waiting to freeze to death. The power grid in Oymyakon is fragile and frequently interrupted. Electricity comes from a diesel generator system at the edge of the village, and when it's extremely cold, below -55 degrees Celsius or so, even this generator struggles. The diesel thickens despite heating, mechanical parts contract and bind, and the whole system operates at reduced efficiency. Blackouts are common, sometimes lasting hours or even days while repairs are made. You learn to live without electricity, Mikhail says. Always have candles, always have oil lamps, always have batteries for flashlights, and you never depend on electricity for heat. That's suicide. Heat comes from wood or coal, things that work when everything else fails. This philosophy extends to all technology here: redundancy and simplicity. Don't depend on any single system. Don't trust complex electronics. Keep backups of backups. Know how to do things manually when machines fail. This isn't paranoia. It's practical wisdom learned through generations of technology failing at exactly the wrong moment. The medical clinic, when you visit it with Mikhail, embodies these principles. The building has electricity when the grid is running, but it also has gas lamps for when power fails. There's a modern examination table, but also older, purely mechanical equipment that doesn't require electricity. The refrigerator for storing medicines runs on electricity, but there's also a backup system using ice harvested from the river, kept in an insulated storage area. Essentially a high-tech version of the iceboxes used before refrigeration existed. The nurse, Elena, visits monthly from Yakutsk, staying for about a week each time. She brings medicines and supplies, examines patients, handles minor medical issues. Anything serious, broken bones, severe illnesses, emergencies, requires evacuation to Yakutsk by vehicle if possible, or by helicopter if it's truly urgent and weather permits. The technology one depend on most, Elena says, is satellite phone. Regular cell phones don't work here reliably. Towers are too far apart. Cold affects them. But satellite phone, this works. If I have emergency, I call for helicopter. Usually comes within 12 hours if weather is clear. She shows you the device, a bulky unit that looks like a phone from the 1990s. Not pretty, not smart, but reliable. More reliable than any smartphone. Historians still argue whether technology has made life easier or harder in places like Oymyakon. On one hand, modern materials and equipment allow survival with less daily hardship than what indigenous peoples experienced a century ago. On the other hand, dependence on technology creates vulnerabilities. When the generator fails, when the truck breaks down, when the supply convoy doesn't arrive, modern residents might be less equipped to cope than their ancestors who never relied on machines in the first place. The younger generation faces a particular technological tension. They've grown up with internet, slow internet, yes, but internet nonetheless. They know about smartphones, social media, streaming video, all the digital conveniences their peers in Moscow or St. Petersburg take for granted. But these technologies barely function in Oymyakon, creating a sense of exclusion, of being left behind by the modern world. My daughter is 16, Victor tells you. She wants to be, what's the word? Influencer? Make videos for internet. I tell her, you can't upload videos from here. Internet too slow. She says she'll move to Yakutsk after school. Maybe she will. I understand. The world is connected now except here. We're not connected. We're isolated island in digital ocean. As evening deepens and you sit by the wood stove, that most ancient and reliable of technologies, unchanged in its essentials for thousands of years, you think about the paradox of Oymyakon. The village exists because of technology. Insulated clothing, efficient stoves, vehicles that can operate in extreme cold, fuel additives, modern materials. Yet the cutting edge of technology, all those smart devices and internet-connected conveniences that define modern life, barely penetrate here. You're living in a temporal hybrid zone, where 19th century solutions, with stoves, oil lamps, manual tools, coexist with 21st century technology, satellite phones, internet, modern vehicles, and often the 19th century solutions prove more reliable. Your expensive smartphone is still sitting near the stove, slowly recovering from its electronic hypothermia, while Mikhail's ancient button phone sits on the table, ready for use, indifferent to the cold. Outside, the temperature has dropped to minus 60 degrees Celsius. Inside, the wood stove crackles, providing warmth through principles that have worked since humans first controlled fire. Some technologies are timeless. Others are fair-weather friends, impressive in comfortable conditions but useless when survival is at stake. Oymyakon is the test that reveals which is which. The knock on the door comes at 7 p.m., which means it's been dark for hours already, and will remain dark for many hours more. But this is expected. Mikhail's gathering, the one he mentioned days ago. You hear voices outside, muffled by layers of fabric, and then the door opens, admitting a blast of cold air along with 3 bundled figures who look more like space explorers than dinner guests. The decompression ritual begins immediately. The mudroom becomes a hive of activity as people shed their outer layers, hanging coats and scarves on hooks already crowded with Mikhail's own gear. Boots come off, revealing felt liners that get hung to dry. Face masks are peeled away, revealing red cheeks and frost-crusted eyebrows. The visitors emerge from their cocoons. Victor, whom you've met before, a woman named Ludmila who lives 2 houses down, and Pavel, the truck driver. Only minus 58 degrees Celsius tonight, Victor announces cheerfully. Almost spring weather. This gets a laugh from everyone. You're learning that joking about the cold is a social requirement here, a way of asserting dominance over an environment that could kill you. If you can laugh about it, it hasn't beaten you yet. The table is laden with food, a communal effort. Everyone has brought something. Victor brought stroganina, freshly shaved, arranged on a plate. Ludmila brought bread, homemade, still warm in its insulated carrier. Pavel brought pickled vegetables from his summer garden, preserved in jars. Natasha brought what she calls Siberian pelmeni, dumplings filled with reindeer meat. The spread is modest by the standards of a city feast, but here, given the challenges of food acquisition and storage, it represents considerable effort and generosity. Tea is served immediately, always tea first. The pot is enormous, big enough to serve everyone multiple cups, and people accept their servings gratefully. The tea is black, strong, unsweetened, though sugar cubes are available for those who want them. You notice that people hold their cups for a long time, warming their hands even in the heated room, as if the habit of seeking warmth is so ingrained it persists even when not strictly necessary. Olga, the eldest, is given the seat closest to the stove, a position of honor and also practicality. At 93, her circulation isn't what it once was. She's tiny, wizened, her face a network of deep wrinkles that map out 9 decades of squinting against wind and cold. But her eyes are sharp, alert, missing nothing. "So you're the visitor," she says to you in Russian, which Anna translates. "The one from the warm place who wants to understand our ice paradise." The way she says ice paradise is clearly ironic, but also somehow affectionate. You confirm that yes, you're trying to understand what life is like here. Olga nods slowly. "You picked a good year," she says. "This is easy winter, only minus 60 degrees Celsius at worst." In 1933, when they recorded minus 67.7 degrees Celsius, I was just 1 year old. My mother told me later that people were afraid to go outside, afraid their lungs would freeze. Some did go out and some did get frostbite in their lungs, coughed blood for weeks. The conversation flows in Russian, with Anna translating key points for your benefit. The topics range widely: news from Yakutsk, Pavel always has the latest, gossip about neighbors, discussion of whose fish traps are producing well this season, complaints about the irregular power supply, speculation about whether the winter will break early this year or drag on into May as it sometimes does. But underneath these surface conversations, you sense something deeper happening. This gathering isn't primarily about exchanging information, though that's part of it. It's about reinforcing social bonds, about confirming that everyone is still here, still alive, still part of the community. In a place where isolation can be lethal, these regular gatherings serve a vital survival function. Sergei, the schoolteacher, asks you about your impressions of the school. You tell him honestly. You were amazed by the children, their resilience, their apparent comfort in conditions that terrify you. They're adapted, he says, echoing what the other teacher, Svetlana, told you. But it's not just physical adaptation. The psychological, social, cultural. They grow up knowing this is normal, so it becomes normal. You and I, he gestures to himself and you. We come from places where -10 degrees Celsius is considered harsh winter. Our baseline is different. These children's baseline is -50 degrees Celsius. That's their normal. Ludmila, who works at the small store you visited, adds her perspective. Community is everything here. In cities, people can be anonymous. You cannot know your neighbors, never speak to people in your building. Here, that's impossible. We must know each other, must help each other, or we all fail. This gathering, we do this every week, different houses. Not because we need to discuss anything important, because we need to see each other, confirm we're all okay. This practice, you learn, has ancient roots. Indigenous peoples of Siberia, long before permanent settlements existed, would gather in the largest yuranga or tent when winter camps were established. These gatherings served multiple purposes. Sharing warmth, many bodies in one space generate significant heat. Sharing food, sharing stories and news, and providing psychological support during the long darkness. The conversation turns to departures, people who've left Oymyakon for cities. Victor mentions a family who moved to Yakutsk 3 years ago. The husband got job there, better paying. They took their children, thought it would be easier. But I hear they're not happy. Wife misses it here. Children can't adjust to crowds, to noise, to pollution. Maybe they come back. Many come back, Olga observes. They leave, they think city will be paradise. But city has its own coldness. Not temperature coldness, people coldness. Nobody knows you. Nobody cares if you live or die. Here, everyone knows you. Everyone cares. That's worth more than easy shopping and fast internet. This sentiment, that the social warmth of Oymyakon compensates for the physical cold, comes up repeatedly in various forms throughout the evening. You're starting to understand it's not just poetic language. In a very real sense, the community's social cohesion is a survival technology as important as insulated clothing or efficient stoves. The food is consumed slowly, with conversation punctuating bites. The stroganina is passed around, each person taking a few slices. The pelmeni are eaten with appreciation. Making them requires considerable effort, hand-wrapping each dumpling, and Natasha has clearly spent hours preparing them. The pickled vegetables provide a rare taste of summer, preserved in brine, a small victory over the seasons. Pavel produces a bottle of vodka, the inevitable appearance of alcohol at any Russian gathering. But it's consumed moderately, almost ceremoniously. Small shots are poured, toasts are made. To survival, Victor proposes and everyone drinks. To spring, Ludmila offers and everyone drinks again. To those who aren't here, Sergei says quietly, and the mood shifts slightly, becoming more somber as everyone drinks to the memory of community members who've died, moved away, or are simply absent this evening. The vodka serves a practical purpose beyond social lubrication. It's warm going down, it increases blood flow, and in a more emergency context, it can be used as antiseptic, fuel additive, or even trade currency. Pavel jokes that vodka is the 5th element of survival in Siberia, after air, water, food, and shelter. Nobody disagrees. As the evening progresses, someone produces a guitar. Sergei, it turns out, plays. He begins strumming, and people start singing. The songs are mostly Russian folk songs, melancholy melodies about vast distances, harsh winters, and longing for absent loved ones. You don't understand most of the words, but the emotional content is universal. These are songs of endurance, of making meaning out of hardship. Olga, animated by tea and vodka and company, begins telling stories from her childhood. Anna translates, though Olga's animated gestures and facial expressions convey much even without words. She talks about the 1930s, when Oymyakon was being developed as a permanent settlement, when most residents were either indigenous people being forcibly settled or prisoners sent from gulags. She describes winters with no electricity, no motorized vehicles, no connection to the outside world for months at a time. "We survived on fish, reindeer, and stubbornness," she says. "Mostly stubbornness. The cold wanted us dead, but we refused to die. Every morning you woke up was victory. Every spring was miracle." She pauses, sipping her tea. "Now, people complain about internet being slow. We had no internet. We had no telephone. We had nothing but each other and ice. And we survived." There's a silence after this, a collective moment of reflection. The younger people in the room, Victor, Pavel, even Mikhail, who's only 63, seem to be measuring themselves against their predecessors, wondering if they have that same core of stubbornness, that same refusal to surrender. Around 10 p.m., someone mentions checking on vehicles. Engines that have been idling need to be visually inspected periodically to ensure they're still running, that exhaust pipes haven't become blocked by ice, that nothing has gone wrong. Pavel and Victor bundle up and step outside for this task. They return a few minutes later, reporting that everything looks good, all vehicles still running, no problems visible. The gathering continues past midnight, an impressive display of endurance given that most people will need to walk home through minus 58 degrees Celsius darkness, then wake up tomorrow and continue their routines. But nobody seems in a hurry to leave. This time together, this pocket of warmth and companionship, is too precious to cut short. You watch these people, these hardy, stubborn survivors who've chosen to remain in one of Earth's harshest inhabited environments, and you realize that Oymyakon's survival isn't ultimately about technology or economics or even environmental adaptation. It's about this. People gathering around a stove, sharing food and stories, confirming their connections to each other, building social warmth that can withstand any amount of physical cold. When the gathering finally breaks up around 1 a.m., the departures are gradual. People layer back up slowly, reluctant to leave the warmth. Farewells are warm, accompanied by embraces despite the bulk of winter clothing. "See you next week," someone says, though it's not clear whose house will host the next gathering. It doesn't matter. Someone will host, someone always hosts, because these gatherings are non-negotiable, as essential to survival as fuel and food. You help Mikhail clean up after everyone's gone. The house feels empty now, too large, the absence of those 10 bodies noticeable in the sudden quiet and slight drop in temperature. But Mikhail is smiling as he washes dishes in the limited water he allows himself. "Good evening," he says simply. "This is why we stay. Not the cold, not the hardship, but this community, knowing you're not alone. Knowing that if your stove goes out, someone will notice. Knowing that if you need help, it will come. In cities, people have everything except this. Here, we have nothing except this. And this is enough. You understand now. You finally understand. Oymyakon isn't a collection of individuals grimly enduring hardship. It's a community that has transformed hardship into the very thing that binds them together, that gives their lives meaning and purpose. The cold is what makes the warmth, both literal and social, so precious. The isolation is what makes the gathering so vital. The constant threat of death is what makes every shared meal, every laugh, every moment of connection, feel like a small miracle. Outside, the temperature is minus 59 degrees Celsius. Inside, you're warm, fed, and for the first time since arriving, you feel like you understand why someone might choose this impossible life. It's 10 p.m., and you're preparing for sleep in a ritual that has become familiar over your weeks here. The process begins with scraping your pillow. The ice is accumulated again, as it does every night, a thin crust of frozen breath from the previous night that you chip away with your fingernails. The ice comes off in satisfying flakes, revealing the pillowcase beneath, slightly damp but no longer rigid with frost. The bedroom is cold, maybe 10 degrees Celsius now, colder than it was earlier because the small electric heater has been fighting a losing battle against the night's dropping temperatures. Outside, Mikhail informed you earlier, it's minus 61 degrees Celsius, one of the coldest nights you've experienced here. The wind has picked up slightly, which is unusual. Still air is the norm, and that wind makes everything feel colder, more hostile, as if the environment has decided to remind you exactly how unwelcome you are. You're wearing thermal underwear, wool socks, and a knit cap. This is your sleep uniform now, as essential as pajamas were in your previous life. The idea of sleeping in just underwear, or even just lightweight pajamas, seems like a fever dream from another reality. Here, you layer even for sleep because the cold never sleeps, never takes a break, never stops probing for weakness. The blankets are piled on the bed. 4 of them tonight, heavy wool and thick quilted comforters that together weigh probably 15 pounds. You've learned the technique. Spread them carefully, ensuring no gaps at the edges where cold air might infiltrate, and tuck them tightly around the mattress to create a sealed cocoon. The weight of the blankets is itself comforting, a physical presence that makes you feel protected, shielded. Before getting into bed, you do something that would seem absurd anywhere else. You blow your nose thoroughly and drink a small amount of water. Mikhail taught you this. If your nose is congested, you'll breathe through your mouth during sleep, which means more moisture exhaling onto your pillow, which means more ice accumulation. The water, meanwhile, prevents your mouth from getting too dry. The air here is desiccated, with almost no humidity, and sleeping with your mouth open can leave you with a painfully dry throat by morning. You slide under the blankets, and immediately the contrast hits you. The sheets are cold. They've been sitting in this 10 degrees Celsius room all day, and touching them is like sliding into a refrigerator. Your body heat begins warming the immediate area around you, but it's a slow process. You curl into a fetal position, minimizing surface area, conserving heat, waiting for the cocoon to warm. The window is completely opaque with frost, both inside and out. Earlier, you watched as Mikhail scraped the interior frost away to look outside, but it has already begun reforming, delicate ferns of ice crystal growing across the glass. By morning, it will be opaque again, a privacy screen created by the cold itself. You can hear the wind outside, a low moaning that's rare here. Usually the air is too still and heavy for wind. The sound is both eerie and somehow comforting, a reminder that you're inside, protected, that there are walls between you and the killing cold. Your face is the only exposed part of your body, and it's cold. The air you're breathing is cold, though not as brutally cold as outside. Maybe 8 degrees Celsius or 9 degrees Celsius right here in your breathing zone. Each breath out creates a small cloud of vapor that rises and dissipates. By morning, some of this vapor will have frozen on the blanket near your mouth, creating a small stiff patch of frozen fabric. You think about the people of Oymyakon, all 500 of them, all simultaneously performing this same ritual of preparation, creating their own small zones of survivable warmth in individual houses scattered across the frozen landscape. 500 separate cocoons, 500 small victories over the environment, 500 stubborn refusals to acknowledge that humans probably shouldn't live here. Olga, 93 years old, has done this approximately 34,000 times in her life. 34,000 nights of scraping pillows, layering blankets, breathing clouds of frozen vapor into the darkness. That's 34,000 small acts of survival, 34,000 mornings of waking up still alive despite everything. The accumulated weight of that endurance is staggering. The children sleeping in their beds right now, like Katya, the 10-year-old you met at school, are doing this without thinking about it, without considering it remarkable. For them, this is just how sleep works. You scrape your pillow, you pile on blankets, you wake up with frost in your hair, and you begin another day. They don't know that, in most of the world, people sleep in lightweight pajamas under a single sheet, maybe a light blanket. That reality would seem as alien to them as their reality seems to you. Your thoughts begin to drift as your body heat slowly warms the space beneath the blankets. You're not quite warm, but you've achieved equilibrium. You're no longer actively getting colder, which is the best you can hope for. The weight of the blankets presses down, and you feel yourself beginning to relax despite the cold, despite the knowledge that you're sleeping in what amounts to a walk-in freezer. You think about time, about how it moves differently here. In your normal life, seasons were gentle transitions, easily ignored if you spent most of your time indoors with climate control. Here, seasons are existential realities that dictate every aspect of existence. Winter isn't just a time when you need a jacket. It's a months-long siege that requires constant vigilance, constant effort, constant expenditure of resources just to continue existing. The darkness outside is complete, absolute. No streetlights, the village has a few lights on main paths, but they're often turned off to conserve electricity. No light pollution from nearby cities because there are no nearby cities. Just darkness, the kind of deep, ancient darkness that humans evolved to fear, and that darkness will last for another 13 or 14 hours until the sun makes its brief, apologetic appearance. In this darkness, in this cold, under these blankets in this impossible place, you're experiencing something that most modern humans never experience. The raw, unmediated reality of winter as our ancestors knew it. Not winter softened by central heating and insulated buildings and electric lights, but winter in its pure, hostile form. Winter as a force that wants you dead and must be actively resisted every moment of every day. You shift slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position, and feel the cold rush in through the small gap you've created in your blanket fortress. You quickly seal the gap, re-establishing your cocoon. This is the dance of winter sleep, balancing comfort against heat retention, movement against cold exposure, the need to adjust position against the cost of lost warmth. Your last conscious thoughts, as sleep finally pulls you under, are of gratitude for small things. For the blankets weighing you down, for the walls that keep out the minus 61 degrees Celsius air, for the wood stove in the next room that Mikhail has loaded with enough wood to burn through the night, for the body heat that your own metabolism generates, for the simple fact that you're warm enough to sleep rather than having to fight for every degree of temperature. You sleep, but not deeply. Part of your brain remains alert to the cold, monitoring your body's temperature, ready to wake you if something goes wrong, if the blankets slip off, if the room gets dangerously cold. This is adaptive sleep, survival sleep, the kind of rest that keeps one ear open for the tiger at the mouth of the cave. And then, after a period you can't measure, maybe 4 hours, maybe 6, you're awake again. You don't know what woke you. Maybe nothing. Maybe just your body's survival instincts, checking in, confirming that you're still alive, still warm enough, still functional. The room is darker now, if that's possible, because even the small amount of moonlight that was filtering through the frosted window has gone. You can't see anything, not even your hand in front of your face. But you can hear. The wind outside, stronger now, rattling something loose. Maybe a shutter, maybe a piece of roofing material. The sound of the house itself, creaking and groaning as the wood contracts in the cold. The nails and joints complaining about the temperature stress. And from the main room, the faint crackle of the wood stove, still burning, still fighting. You reach out from under the blankets. A tactical error you realize immediately and feel the air. The shockingly cold, painfully cold on your exposed hand. You pull it back quickly, tucking it against your body to rewarm. The bedroom has gotten colder while you slept, maybe down to 5 degrees Celsius now, and you briefly consider getting up to adjust the electric heater. But that would require leaving your cocoon, exposing yourself to the cold, and the calculation isn't favorable. Better to stay put, to preserve the warmth you have. You lie there, suspended between sleep and wakefulness, and think about the morning that's coming. You'll wake, or more accurately, you'll decide to stop pretending to sleep around 6:30 or 7 a.m. It will still be dark. You'll scrape your pillow again, more frost having accumulated during the night. You'll reluctantly emerge from your blankets, gasping at the cold. You'll layer on your clothes, pants over thermal underwear, sweater over shirt, jacket over sweater. You'll make your way to the kitchen where Mikhail will already be up, where the wood stove will have been freshly stoked, where tea will be brewing. And then you'll face the question that faces everyone in Oymyakon every morning. What tasks must be done today that require going outside? Check on the vehicle, always necessary. Perhaps retrieve something from the outdoor storage. Maybe help Mikhail check his fish traps again. Each outdoor excursion must be carefully considered, planned, because each one costs body heat, each one carries risk, each one is a small gamble with the environment. But that's tomorrow's problem. Right now, in this moment, you're alive, you're warm enough, you're surviving. Your pillow, which you scraped clean before sleeping, has already accumulated a new layer of frost from hours of breathing. By morning, you'll scrape it again. This is the rhythm of life in Oymyakon. Maintain, survive, repeat. Scrape the pillow, feed the stove, check the car, manage the water, preserve the heat, protect the warmth. You're drifting back towards sleep now, your thoughts becoming more diffuse, less coherent. Images float through your mind. The children walking to school in the darkness, flashlights bobbing. The gathering at Mikhail's house, faces illuminated by the warm light of the wood stove. The abandoned house on the village edge, slowly being reclaimed by permafrost and ice. Olga's weathered face, mapping out 93 years of survival. The fish frozen solid in their trap under the river ice. All of these images, all of these moments are fragments of something larger, the ongoing miracle of human persistence in a place that should be uninhabitable. Tomorrow, you'll wake and scrape your pillow and begin another day of careful survival. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until eventually, if you stay long enough, this impossible life will start to feel possible, even normal. But you won't stay that long. You'll leave. Return to your world of comfort and convenience, where pillows stay dry and sleep requires only a single blanket. You'll remember this place, though, this cold, dark, impossible place where people choose to live, choose to scrape ice off their pillows every night, choose to embrace hardship because it makes them part of something larger than individual comfort. The wind picks up outside, howling now, and you hear a distant sound. Maybe a door banging, maybe just the wind itself finding a gap to whistle through. The house groans and settles. The wood stove crackles. Your breathing creates another small cloud of frost. And somehow, despite everything, you're comfortable. Not warm exactly, but comfortable in a deeper sense. Safe, protected, part of a community that has mastered the art of surviving the unsurvivable. Sleep takes you again, deeper now, and you dream of ice crystals growing into forests, of breath freezing into diamonds, of a sun that remembers how to provide warmth. Dreams of spring, still months away, but inevitable. Dreams of survival, which is the most ancient human dream of all. And so the night passes in Oymyakon. Outside, the temperature bottoms out at minus 63 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in under a minute, cold enough that the air itself seems to crystallize. But inside 500 small houses, 500 separate cocoons of warmth persist. People sleep under piles of blankets, their breath frosting their pillows, their bodies generating the heat that keeps them alive. In the morning, they'll wake. They'll scrape their pillows. They'll stoke their stoves. They'll check their vehicles. They'll continue existing in a place that challenges every assumption about where humans can live. And in doing so, they'll prove something fundamental about human nature. That we can adapt to almost anything, survive almost anywhere, as long as we have each other, as long as we refuse to give up, as long as we're willing to scrape the ice off our pillows every single night and call it home. The darkness is vast. The cold is immense. But the stubborn human spirit burns brighter than any fire, warmer than any stove. This is Oymyakon. This is survival at minus 71 degrees Celsius. This is life at the edge of what's possible. And somehow, impossibly, beautifully, it works. The long night stretches on, peaceful now, quiet except for the wind and the creaking houses and the distant sound of engines idling through the darkness. 500 heartbeats persist in the frozen landscape. 500 breaths create small clouds of ice. 500 small victories over entropy and cold and the vast indifference of the universe. You sleep. The village sleeps. The ice grows thicker on the river. The stars will overhead, brilliant in the clear, dry air. And tomorrow it will all begin again. The scraping, the surviving, the stubborn refusal to acknowledge that this life is impossible. Because if you can scrape ice off your pillow and still smile in the morning, if you can walk through minus 60 degrees Celsius darkness and still believe in spring, if you can gather with your neighbors and laugh despite everything, then nothing is truly impossible. The cold is just cold. The darkness is just darkness. And you, small and warm and persistently alive, are proof that the human spirit cannot be frozen, no matter how hard winter tries. Sweet dreams from Oymyakon, where sleep is an act of courage, where every morning is a small miracle, and where the ice on your pillow is just another reminder that you're still here, still breathing, still surviving at the coldest inhabited place on Earth.